Hi, I finally got hold of the Erica Synths Syntrx. This is the version 2, and I say finally because it's been out for 3 years now. This originally came out in March 2023, and I think it's obligatory to point out, although I think most people watching this channel will already know, that this isn't a clone of, but a massive nod to the original EMS Synthi. And that came in 2 flavors. This one, the EMS VCS3, housed in a very tasteful, beautiful wooden enclosure, and the more portable Synthi, which came with a keyboard in a handy case. And the used prices of these are astronomical. If you missed out on this one from Soundgas, don't worry, there's another for sale, a snip at £24,000 plus VAT. So a modern version of that coming out at less than £2,000 is very welcome indeed. To point out the similarities, we've got 3 oscillators, we've got a trapezoid looping envelope, which until recently I used to think was pronounced trapezoid. A trapezoid sounds a little bit more fun, a little bit more dangerous, probably suits the character of the synth a little bit more at least. But the most obvious similarity is this. It's the 16x16 pin matrix. This one's digital, obviously, which you can save your setup, like saving the patch cables on a modular system. And it also means you can't lose your patch pins. And like I say, this one is the successor to the Syntrx I, which had speakers, it had vernier pots like the original EMS, which looked really cool, and a real spring reverb. But we've now got an onboard 3-channel sequencer for pitch, plus 2 channels of modulation. And this one's replaced the spring reverb with a DSP reverb and delay, and the addition of an envelope follower and external gate input. So we've lost a few things, but what we've gained is a more usable and more flexible synth. The oscillators, for example, it's easy to tune these. We've got the 7 more standard octave switches, plus we've got a fine tune with plus or minus an octave, and it's just easier to dial in your tuning with this. Although, you know, they don't look as cool as those EMS look-ins. Are they called vernier pots? And after 3 years, I'm obviously behind the curve as far as reviews go, but that did give me the opportunity to look at what people have thought and what people have said about this. So in this video, I want to address a couple of things. Firstly is that it's not actually as complex as you think. You look at that matrix and you're not sure what's going on, and it's really quite easy to use once you've wrapped your head around it. And secondly, it's not just a special effects crazy machine. You can really get really superb sounds out of this. In effect, it's a 3 oscillator monosynth. So anything that your mini mode can do, this can do, and anything that any standard monosynth can do, this can do. And it sounds beautiful. It's got 3 VCOs in it. It's an all analog signal path. So you can, as I say, yeah, I'll try and show that you can use it as a standard synth, and then you can take it into the territory most synths couldn't even dream of. And I'll start with this demo where the synth is simply playing a drone that's been modulated by the looping trapezoid, while I tweak a couple of knobs, changing the FM amount, the tuning, the noise, and some live filter modulation with the joystick. I then stuck some drum samples, a wail, and a vocal snippet over the top in Logic. And this is 5 minutes long, so sit back and enjoy. I did cut this down for the edit. The original is over 10 minutes. But it sounds so nice, it deserves to be played. Before we go into how you program this and why it is like a really nice monosynth with lots of extra additions to it, I'll just run through that patch because it's a nice way of showing how you can set up a single patch, create a track out of it with just a few little tweaks. We need to set everything up via the modulation matrix. This is just the same as any old pin matrix. Got both wave shapes of Oscillator 1 going into the filter as well as Oscillator 2 going into the filter. So these are both going into the filter like you would on any standard synth, as it were. The output of the filter is then going into this envelope signal input. And the envelope signal, here's the envelope. The envelope signal is the audio that's going into the envelope. That's an envelope and a VCA. And that'll all make sense in a second, don't worry. So you've got the envelope signal. So the audio is going from the oscillator into the filter and then into the envelope. And then from the envelope, it's going out. So oscillator into filter, filter into envelope, envelope to the outputs, channel 1 and channel 2, and also to the scope so you can see what's happening. I've put this on manual for the minute. So this is the envelope CV, as it were. Control signal, trapezoid it's called. So this is what we've got over here. The trapezoid is controlling on the control inputs, the filter. These are the signal inputs to the audio inputs. So the audio is going from the oscillator to the filter, for the filter to the envelope. But over here, we are modulating the trapezoid, or the trapezoid is modulating the filter frequency. So that's like turning up the envelope amount on any sort of standard synth. the signal being the volume. That's the amount of audio coming out of the envelope. Also got the effects in here, so the effects are going to channel 1 and channel 2 output. If I scroll down and turn the effects off, to put them back on, we can turn them, well, turn the level down there, but just showing you how this works really. So what else have we got going on that patch? Because it's not a simple tone, is it? Well, we've got Oscillator 1 modulating itself. So when I hit this, the level of the sine from Oscillator 1 is changing the pitch of Oscillator 1. Which is why you see me tweaking that in the demo. We've also got noise. Noise is coming in as well. So you can adjust the level of the noise. So we're sending it to the filter, and then the filter to the envelope to the outputs and the effects. But we're going to change the level of it here. And then I'm changing the octave of Oscillator 2. Turn it up. And with this, you see down here on the joystick, left to right is modulating the filter frequency. But in the demo, it's running continuously, and that's because I've got this on a looping mode. Over here, it's only triggered manually, but this gives us a loop. And I thought that gave a distinct Doctor Who style vibe. And the last thing I'm doing here is I'm using Oscillator 3, which is essentially the LFO, to modulate the oscillator shapes. Let's try and hear it so that we can just hear the square. Let's turn this down. Let's turn this off. So let's turn the sine off so we're not listening to that. Oh, level there. Yeah. So you can hear two squares happening there. Let's turn one down. In fact, I'm not listening to that at all in that demo, am I? I can adjust the speed of that with the rate of this. Let's turn this down. And that's the amount of modulation, the level coming out of here. You can adjust the levels on these as well. If we go to this one over here, because it's on its own, it might be easier to see. If we hit this, you can see it's gone duller, or it's gone off. That's this one. So that's on full, bit duller, and a bit duller. So that's like having three separate resistances in the pins that you'd have on a traditional pin matrix. So you can adjust the overall amount with this. That's back on full, but then on lots of the outputs, you've got levels. So those levels change the level of the control or the level of the signal going into the modulation matrix as well. So actually that's a relatively simple patch. That sounds massive, but I did go into a little bit more detail than I was planning there, but hopefully that will make this next section a little bit easier to understand because I'll repeat a couple of the bits, sort of drive the message home. But before I do that, here's a little synthy style jam for anyone who's got withdrawal symptoms, thinking they were going to hear lots of fizzes, pops, crackles and stuff like that. So it covers that ground really respectably. Back to doing some more conventional sound design then. What I'm going to build is this. Just to start off, this is a 3 oscillator monosynth tone. I'll just clear the matrix now and start from scratch. So if I go into recall, let's go to an empty one. This is empty, so there's nothing on that matrix now. And what we need to do is put the oscillators into the filter into the envelope, and then the envelope into the outputs. So I'll go to each of the oscillators first. So we'll go to oscillator 1 into the filter, done. So this is oscillator, wave shape, pulse, sine, oscillator 2 combined. Oscillator 3, we've got the sawtooth and then the square. And then we'll stick the noise in as well, so we've got all the noise sources going into that. And they're all going into the filter, so we need the filter now to go into the envelope signal. So the envelope signal is the audio for the VCA, basically. And then we need the envelope signal to then go out of channels 1 and 2, so 1 and 2. So when I hit this, we'll hear, well, let's turn some of the oscillators up. That's the most simple form. Now we'll modulate the filter with the envelope. This is what's called the trapezoid, and the trapezoid is like the control voltage or the control signal for the envelope. So we want the back control signal from the trapezoid to modulate the control input of the filter. So if we turn the filter down, turn that up, put some resonance on, it's easier to hear. So like I said before, this is now like the filter envelope amount that you'll get on any synth. And that's it, that's your standard 3 oscillator monosynth. So anything you could do on a monosynth, you can do on this. So let's turn into 2 oscillators. Detune one of them. Make it snappier. And plug in a keyboard in, you get a standard synth. But we'll go a little bit more complex here. We'll modulate the wave shapes of oscillator 1 with oscillator 3. So just like on a Minimoog, oscillator 3 becomes your LFO. So we want to take oscillator 3 out of the signal, just like turning the switch off on the Minimoog. So let's take that out of the signal. And let's put oscillator 3 into the control input for the oscillator shapes. And let's use the triangle oscillator shape. So now this will modulate this oscillator shape here. So let's turn that up we need to turn that up. It doesn't automatically go through. You've got to set the level with this. So in here, we've got 3 separate levels, actually. I'll show that quickly. If I come into these oscillators, just play something. If I come into these and then I hit this a couple of times, so you've got 100%, 70% and 30%. So now they're at 30%. So the maximum that these can output is 30%. Let's put them back up to 100. So once you patch the signal in, you still have to turn the level up. That's all I'm trying to say there. So we've got the level going into the oscillator shape. So let's just listen to the pulse on oscillator 1. You can hear it's modulating already. We can change the shape of oscillator 3. But let's have it on a standard triangle. Let's put it down an octave. So then you can change the shape of oscillator 1. Let's turn that modulation off. On this switch here, determines which of the oscillator shapes it's changing. So we can have it on PWM, both. So the pulse width, the sine, to turn that off, or both. Let's just leave it there for now, turn this one down. So PWM there, it's something the mini mode can't do. And let's just hear what it sounds like modulating the sine. Then we've got a sawtooth on oscillator 2. Let's turn that up, have a listen to that. Put the shape on there, and we want that on the sawtooth. Had that tuned really high, actually. Surprised it sounded so good on the PWM. But let's put it back on the PWM just so that we can hear it properly, shall we? So put that back on there, turn that one up, that one down. And as another brief aside, here's a quick demo with me using it as a more standard keyboard. In this, I'm using sync and modulating the pitch of oscillator 2 using a recorded pattern on the joystick, then bringing in the sequencer. Again, just using it in a more musical role. And if we wanted to do frequency modulation, we'd modulate the oscillator frequency. So let's modulate the oscillator frequency of 2 with oscillator 3. So let's come down there. So Oscillator 3, let's do that with the square from Oscillator 3, shall we? So let's hit that. So now this will be modulated by this. So we might get a sequencer style thing. Actually, I put it on 1 there, didn't I? So let's turn 2 down, listen to 1. That's the PWM. Now let's add the frequency modulation. So there you go. That's what I mean by the sequencer style thing. And of course, we can go into audio rates. So let's turn the PWM down. So there's nothing unfamiliar there whatsoever, is there? And it's really quite a simple little setup. Let's add some effects. I want the envelope signal to go into the effects. So let's scroll down to there, envelope signal into the effects. So now these will come live, and then we want the effects to come out of the main outputs. So 1 in there, 1 in there. Again, really simple to set up. It's a nice delay, that. A nice reverb as well. It is a shame you can't modulate those parameters via the matrix, but I suppose you've only got 16 by 16 in there, haven't you? You can change the delay type in the global settings. Shift and patch back gets us in the global settings, and we've got the BBD on or off. When it's off, it's a tape mode. Just throwing things out there as I think of them. Let's add some noise. So come to the noise here, turn the level up. Let's come out of the menu. So the noise is already patched in. I patched that in earlier. Now the noise, let's turn everything else down. Turn that off for now. We've got a tone control on the noise, which is really useful. It's like it's got its own filter. The outputs themselves have got their own filter on there as well. For a little bit more added tone control. But let's take a look at that trapezoid, because that's a little bit more complex than your standard ADSR. The attack, the on, the decay, and the off stage are all times. Unlike an ADSR where the sustain is a level, on here the on is actually a time. So you've got an attack time, a remain on time, a decay time, and a switch off time. So if I take it off manual, when it's on manual, it's like gated, so it can just hold stuff on and off, bit of decay on. That decay only kicks in once you release the gate. So you've got attack time, then the hold time, then the decay time. So you don't have that drop to a sustain level. But if we put this onto off now, we've got the on time and the off time. So this is like a square. Let's turn that off. It's got no attack or no decay, so it's either on or it's off. Then let's add some attack, some decay. So you can hear it's adding the attack time and adding the decay time. Let's take the off time down. And I was doing something similar in that demo, and I was using this as the basis for the BPM. So when I went into Logic to add the beats, they were at 124.9623 BPM or something. So if you want to sync it to something else and use this trapezoid, well, it's quite simple to do actually, because you've got this gate input here. So you could put a kick into that and that would trigger a gate. So you get a gate trigger to do all these little bits that you want to do here. So instead of you could just gate it. And then just tweak that to get whatever swingy sort of rhythm you want. Another quick thing to show is the ring modulator actually, because this is really nice as well. So we've got different inputs for the ring modulator. So source B, source A is selected here. So we want a ring modulator. Let's put 3 in again as the source to the ring mod. Let's put the triangle from Oscillator 3 as the ring mod source. And then we've got source A, I should say. Then we've got source B here. So let's put Oscillator 2 as source B. And then we need the ring modulator to go into the filter. So ring modulator into the filter. And then we could take out the other oscillators going into the filter because we just want to hear the ring mod. And then we want, yeah, that should do it, ring mod into the filter, because that then goes into the envelope, and the envelope then goes into the two outputs. So hopefully, yeah, we've got that right. We should be hearing the ring modulator. We'll need to turn the ring modulator up and Oscillator 3 up, and there's Oscillator 2 up as well. Yeah. So it turns the... And that's the source of all sorts of grittiness that you can get from this. Other things to point out on this are the envelope follower. So that works with the gate as well. So you can put whatever you like into there and you can create an envelope from it. The scope isn't just for show either. Whatever you put into the scope can come out of the scope output there as a CV, which you can then put back into one of the inputs, and you could maybe invert it with this. So there's lots of little things to play with, but the scope itself I find is really useful if I put the signals into the scope. So you can have that looking at audio or CV. But as you start adding, let's just turn it down a bit on the levels so we don't overblow things. You can easily overdrive that. You can start getting some crackles and stuff, so it's quite handy for that actually, looking at what you're doing. And while I'm on the subject of overdriving stuff, the filter is really easy to overdrive. I'll set the filter to self-oscillate. Then I'll add a sawtooth, and you can hear this as I add this. It overdrives that filter and you lose the resonance almost. Well, you do. If I bring the trapezoid in, modulate it with that. Lovely, dirty, gritty signal, that, isn't it? But the higher we turn that, the more we drive this, so you'll lose the resonance. You've got to be careful. I say careful, it's just the character of this is to get that really, really nice gritty tones out of it. So let's add some other oscillators. Let's add some more. Let's add some reverb because it deserves it. And you'll notice this signal here is going pretty much, well, almost into the red. If I turn the level of the filter up, you can hear that sort of distorting. So we've got different levels here. The level of the filter going into the envelope or the actual signal coming out of the envelope. So we can turn either of those down. We can hear that might be driving the envelope a bit much, so we can turn that down. So this is actually really useful. It's not just to look pretty. And as I say, it does show CVs as well. This selector here, it selects which of the filter inputs are being modulated by CV through the modulation matrix. So that's both of them. That's just the high pass and that's the low pass. Not looked at this sample and hold circuit yet, and it's slightly more complex than just switching in the sample and hold LFO, because we've got to give it an input. So we give it an input from, let's use Oscillator 2 rather than noise, just for something slightly different. So we'll take Oscillator 2 out of the mix, and we'll put it as the input to the sample and hold. So it's going to sample Oscillator 2 as that plays. It's going to sample it at that rate. And this switch here determines whether Oscillator 3 pulse comes into the modulation matrix or the sample and hold. So if you can't hear Oscillator 3 pulse at any point, you've probably got that switch down. So we're going to leave it down here for now, and then we're going to modulate with that. So it's this output now has changed from being the square from Oscillator 3 into being the sample and hold output, and we're going to modulate Oscillator 1 frequency with it. So now Oscillator 1 should be modulated by the sample and hold, and it is. So we'll change this. Let's put some square in there as well. So that's adjusting the range of the modulation. Cool. As is this. And by using the oscillators, you can get slightly less random things from that. Let's try that with Oscillator 3 at a low frequency. So let's take Oscillator 2 out of the input and put Oscillator 3 there. Let's take that out of the mix. You can hear Oscillator 3 while you're playing the sample and hold, but only the triangle. So let's have a listen. So we've got the triangle playing there. Let's hear what that does. So much less random. You can hear it going up and down the triangle. And while we're on modulation, let's take a little look at the joystick. You know what it does, X and Y, modulation. So it's all pretty standard stuff here. Let's modulate the filter frequency with the joystick horizontally. So let's take all this sample and hold stuff out. Or should we just leave it for now? Yeah, just leave it for now. Bring that down. So if we wanted to listen to Oscillator 3, so have a 3 oscillator patch, for example, let's bring that back in. Let's bring Oscillator 3. Let's do this again. Let's take the sample and hold out for now so we don't confuse ourselves. So we're back to having a 3 oscillator monosynth patch, and now want to create PWM but without using the LFO from Oscillator 3, so we've still got 3 oscillators playing, and I'm going to use this to do that. And the way you can do that is that this actually records. So if I start wiggling that, it'll record up to 8 seconds. So now that modulation should be recorded, and we can use that to modulate the pulse width of Oscillator A. So we want the horizontal movement to modulate the oscillator shape. So where are we? Bring it down to there. I was never very good at Etch-a-Sketch. And then we've got a level here. We can turn the levels or adjust the levels of the outputs of this. So let's just listen to Oscillator 1 pulse, just to make sure we're doing it right. Let's put that on 0. And then increase this. There we go. So we've got an LFO from the joystick. So we can add all the other oscillators. We've still got them all in there. But yeah, you can record movements on the joystick. Let's add filter modulation on the vertical axis. So vertical axis, filter frequency. So now, turn that up. So we've still got the PWM. But we've also got modulation of the filter as well. And you can send MIDI CC to the X and the Y. I think it's the only thing that you can actually modulate. It's the only modulation source or destination for MIDI CC. You can set up the MIDI CC for the X and the Y in the global settings. So shift and patch back. It's in these global settings somewhere. MIDI channel 1, clock internal, clock +1. Oh, and another tip while I'm looking through there, you can see I've got the MIDI offset at 36. If you don't put a MIDI offset on, you have to sort of play really low on the keyboard or really high on the keyboard. I forget which one. But when you get it, it's like a little bit offset from central C. I've found that if I put this on 36, so the MIDI offset's 36, which is 3 octaves. So you'll often see people playing it really low or tuning the octaves really low on the controller keyboards to get it to sound normal. But that's how you fix that anyway. velocity, I don't know where it is in this. So there you go. MIDI CC of X is 70, MIDI CC of Y is 71. I've gone a little bit more detailed again than I intended. I just wanted to show how you could set it up as a standard monosynth, but I suppose I did that in the first 2 minutes of that, didn't I? But yeah, you can use it as a standard monosynth, and then you can take it to all those other places that you've heard on all those other videos doing mad, crazy, wacky things with it. It is important to realize that you can only save the modulation matrix, and it's got a sequencer in here. I won't go into the sequencer. The sequencer, you can sequence 16 up to 16 steps of notes plus X and Y as well. So again, it's accessing this as a modulation source. But when you save a patch, you're not saving all the settings on this. You're only saving the settings within here. All this is sort of different. So as when I was saying, like, this is my mini Moog setup, for example, you can't save a patch on a mini Moog, but you can save the setup to have the oscillators going into the filter and the filter going into the envelope, etc., etc. But all these knob positions are different, and that only becomes a bit of an issue, I think, when you're doing something and you're using a trapezoid and you want to get that sort of rhythm, which is why I explained how you could use the gate to sort of help you along with that. But other than that, you know, for me, coming to a synth and having a little play with it, I'm quite used to stuff not having any presets. So that doesn't really bother me too much, but I do realize it would be handier if it did that. But if you really want to save your patches, it does come with a load of these patch sheets. There's quite a few of them here. And while we're talking about things that could be a little bit better, it would be nicer if the effect were stereo. It'd be nice to have, like you do on the Formant, the Erica Synths big Formant that I had out a few weeks ago. They have different switches on the effects for different reverbs and for different delays, which are really handy. And as I said earlier, it'd be nice to be able to modulate them, but it's not a modular synth, is it? It's sort of set, well, it's not semi-modular. It is modular, I suppose, because this is modular, but it's not a full-blown modular system. So I can't be picking on it for not doing that. So I hope you got something out of that. I hope I maybe added to the pool of knowledge on the Syntrx, as it has been out for 3 years already. So difficult to do something that isn't showing anything different, except for, of course, just making sort of cool sounds on it. So yes, thanks for staying to the very end. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please subscribe, ring the bell, join me over on Patreon. I've got patches, samples, downloads, all that normal stuff. And do check out my starskycard.com website as well. Again, patches, samples, all sorts of little goodies on there. So thanks for staying to the very end, and I will see you next time.